Welcome to Make Writing Visible, a blog for teachers. Last time we talked about how do authors get ideas for stories, and I encouraged you to have your students be detectives and try to figure out how authors of published books get their ideas for their stories. This week I'd like to talk about how do your students get ideas for stories. And I want to back it up a little further than most teachers do. I know many teachers will have students make a list of possible ideas that they could write about, and then they can turn to those when it is writing workshop time. But I'd like to back it up even further. Not just the ideas that students get, but how did they get the ideas for those ideas? Hopefully it will be clear. What I do first of all is I give every student in the class this handout that says Ideas for Getting Ideas for Writing. And there's a copy of this on the blog so that you can just print it out in the blog extras. Every student gets a copy of this, and then what I say to them is I say, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to come up with 2 ways you get ideas for ideas. And they look at me sort of puzzled, and then I'll say, well, not the ideas of what you write about, not what your stories are going to be about, but how do you get the ideas? For example, maybe I read books, and a book that I read that was about horses reminds me of, I have a farm 3 houses down from mine, and they have horses, and they let me ride them sometimes. So that horse book reminded me that I might want to write a horse story. But the idea came or was triggered by a book that I read. Another example, maybe I watched a movie or TV show. And what happened in that movie or TV show, maybe it was a story about a big storm. And that reminded me of a time that we had a big storm and we lost power at our house. And so seeing that movie or TV show triggered my own idea. But I got the idea by watching a movie or a TV show. After I share a couple of examples with students, then I will say to them, I'll say, okay, now you have to come up with 2 more ways you get ideas for stories, and you have 2 minutes to do it. I watch the clock. They try to come up with 2 more possible ways that they get ideas for their stories, and then I travel around the classroom and I would help students as I need to. I might say, think of the last 2 stories you wrote. How did you come up with the ideas for those stories? Remember they were about X or Y or Z. And by thinking about specific stories, you're encouraging them to go further back and think how that idea was generated in the first place. After we're done and students have shared their extra ideas, then what I do is a group share. And I'll say, okay, you've got a couple of ideas on your paper on how you get ideas for stories, your ideas for getting ideas. But now what we're going to do is do a group share. And everybody here in the class is going to share the ways they get ideas. And what I would like you to do is be a secretary and write down how other people get ideas for stories. So at the end of this share time, they'll not only have your couple of suggestions that you started with, they'll have their own ideas, and then they can write ideas that other classmates came up with. This is a paper that I love to have students keep in the front of their writing folders, because then they're able to refer to those. So when they're stuck and they say, I can't think of anything to write about, they can go back to their paper that says Ideas for Getting Ideas and see if that triggers anything for them. You'll also see in the attachment, the PDF that I have with this blog, that I have a list of ideas for getting ideas that you can look at. I'll just mention some of them. For example, writing about things that really happen to you. That's probably the number 1 way that students can get ideas for writing, something that really happens to them, because then they know about it, they've experienced it, they can write about it. Another one on here is my interests, what I'm kind of an expert on. Every kid has something they spend more time on than others, whether they build with Legos or whether they have 8 dogs at their house, or because they're a rescue family and they like to rescue dogs, or they like to go snowmobiling. Whatever it is that they seem to be interested in and enjoy, boy, they would be good at writing stories about that. Another one that I talk about is being told what to write about. That's a legitimate one. You as a teacher sometimes dictate what your students have to write about, and so you're telling them what the idea is, and then they have freedom and flexibility within that, but you're the one that's told them what to write about. Another one is family, friends, and pets. If they think about people closest to them, their family, their friends, pets, those often can trigger ideas for them. Trips that they take can trigger ideas. So if you can look at this list that I have, but feel free to add more to it, and I'm sure your students will add more to it. And then keep the writing in the list in the front of the writing folder so kids can try to have ideas for getting ideas for their writing, and then they'll be one step ahead of the game when they do that. Good luck getting ideas.